Hey guys, welcome to the Vendors B2B Summit. Today we have another very special international guest. Her name is Juliana Crispo. For those who don't know Juliana, she's considered to be top in the world when it comes to quickly building out world-class revenue organizations. She's the CEO of Provide, an education-focused network that helps high-performing passive sales talent accelerate their careers at Tier 1 VC-backed startups. A teacher at heart, she's the founder of Sales Startup Bootcamp, independent sales school with over 2,000 students from companies like Salesforce, LinkedIn, and Google. She has been featured in Forbes, Fortune, Huffington Post, and more. Previously, Juliana sold, led, hired, and trained at startups like Ghoster Refuse and Meltwater. On the side, Juliana is also a sponsored pro athlete and competes in the World Natural Bodybuilding Federation's Bikini Division. Juliana, thank you very much and welcome to the summit.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's so great to be here. I'm so excited.
We are very excited to have you here. So before we start, could you talk a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. So I guess my career really started in startups. I actually started my first company fresh out of college. I raised money for it, and I started building a team around me. And that was my really first big lesson of how naive I was fresh out of college going into the startup world, and two, how important it was to be able to know sales and be able to sell your product. I think there's a big misconception with a lot of startups that the game is like, oh, raise a bunch of money. If you build it, they will come. Like just build the best product, that kind of thing. And that was the mentality that I had fresh out of college. And I thought, I can do it. I can totally do it. And the thing that we fell short on was revenue, because we underestimated how important it was to sell. And so that was my first experience fresh out of college, and it was a very rude awakening. So obviously, after that experience and after slowly running out of funding and failing to prove value of our product, I actually, kind of with my tail in between my legs, I took a job at a sales company. I was selling a software as a service product, and that was my first really nose to the grindstone, hardcore sort of consultative selling job. And my thinking going into this, of course, was, I can sell, I can figure out how to do that. I started a company before, I've sold to people, I've raised money, I've convinced people to join my organization, of course I can sell. And then very quickly, again, I learned that I knew nothing about how to convince organizations to actually buy a business product for themselves, right? It's like there's a disconnect between everyone should have this and how do I make people at an organization actually see enough value so that they want to change their whole way of doing things, right? There's a disconnect there. You can totally believe in your product, but you gotta get in their head. And I struggled with that in the very beginning for about a few months. And then I quickly found myself being the top rep in the company out of over 800 reps month over month for a year. It was incredible. I was the top rep out of the world, right? They had offices all over the world. And I was consistently a top performer out of 800 reps. And that it was not a mistake from the lessons I learned in that. And then I went on to managing a sales team, and of course, fell flat on my face again, thought I knew what I was doing. I learned that management is a completely different set of skills than actually selling. And I had to kind of learn a different kind of people skill set, as opposed to, it was a very different skill set. And then I quickly grew my team to being the top revenue producing team out of about 50 teams globally. So that was another feat, beginning, hard time, then figured it out. There was a different process of magic, something clicked, and then smooth sailing from there. I ended up going on over to another company with the promise of selling much larger deals to enterprise companies and working on these 6 and 7 figure contracts. And I was like, that is a skill set that I really need to learn if I want to be good at this. And so I started in that role. It was a unified communications company, kind of doing what Slack is now for video. Really promising company, really promising organization. Not very many salespeople when I started. And then when I was there, you know, I was really young. They gave me the opportunity to go pitch these CTOs at Fortune 500 companies. And so I did that. And now all the major logos, I would say not all of them, about 75% of the major logos that they brag about on their website to this day were deals that I brought in during the 12 months that I was there, which was cool. From there, I opened up their New York office, and that's when I moved from San Francisco to New York City, which is where I'm at now. And I started working with all the agency contracts over there. And then I got attracted to a consumer startup called Ghostery and that challenge was interesting to me because at the time there was this whole play of going from consumer startup to B2B, right? So how as a consumer startup do you actually make money in the enterprise? How do you sell, you know, an ad revenue, or how do you get into the CIO to actually buy this, or how do you sort of land and expand and do a freemium model? And so I was like, this is a challenge I need to figure out. I want to know what's going on. I was one of the first enterprise sales hires there, and we figured out how to get him into the top 25 retailers in terms of revenue in the United States within a very short period of time, with not much of an actual B2B product either. We were like basically selling spreadsheets. So it was a really amazing feat, a really amazing experience. I'm so grateful to have all those opportunities and learning experiences. And then during that time, what happened was I got a lot of my friends who were founders at startups would come to me and say, hey, Juliana, can you help me with this? Can you teach me this? How do I do this now? And I had friends that were raising, you know, some serious money from companies like Sequoia and General Catalyst, and or were backed by Y Combinator, and you know, they were quickly very much learning, like I had years ago, that sales is important, and they don't know anything about how to sell. Like, it's a lot harder than it looks. It sounds so easy, but it's hard. And so I would run these like little workshops on the weekend where I'd have like the founder of these big companies now. Some of the founders have been on the cover of Forbes and Fortune, actually sitting in a little WeWork conference room with me, where I'm whiteboarding out, like, this is how a funnel looks, and this is how the stages of a sales methodology looks. And it was a really, and then, you know, from there, then I started to kind of methodically productize it and make it into a course, because everyone loved it and was like, this helps me, and this has made actual revenue and got me to this next step. So I was like, okay. And then Startup Sales Bootcamp was born, which you can find online if you go to startupsalesbootcamp.com. There's a ton of entrepreneurs who have taken that program and gotten their company from, you know, zero revenue to $100,000 in revenue to now a few million in revenue, based on the methodology there, which I unpack for you very simply. And then from there, a lot of what happened was our clients were coming to us and saying, Juliana, we're selling a ton, but now we don't know how to hire and train salespeople. Can you help us with that? And so then Provide was
in Brazil too.
Huge point, right? Like, how do you vet salespeople? How do you find the right salespeople? How do you know which ones are actually worth their salt or not? And so that's what Provide is doing now. And I've been working on that for almost a year now, and it's been going really well. So working with a lot of major tier 1 venture-backed startups in New York City, software as a service and marketplace companies to build out their sales teams. And it's you know, it's still the early days, still have a lot to learn, but yeah, that's a little bit of my background.
Amazing. So let's talk about sales, and especially to the startup environment. Marco Berg, that I know that is a friend of yours, told me in the interview that we had last year, and that if you look at the most of the category leaders, they are those who have the best marketing and sales execution, not always the best products. And as you were telling a little bit about it too, and I see here in Brazil many startups dedicating a huge part of their time and money to their products. So how important is sales for a startup?
Yeah, the word sales is such a big umbrella word. So the thing I like to think about, and I'm sure you're familiar with this word too, customer development, right?
Yeah.
I actually think customer development is just a derivative of sales. It's pre-sales, right? So I think, sales or customer development is very important, but I would actually classify customer development as the pre-sales process. I'll give you an example. So at Ghostery, we didn't really know what was going to resonate or sell to business customers. Like, we were just this consumer extension with a bunch of great data, and we were like, okay, let's sell something from this great data. So what did we do? Instead of going ahead and building out this entire platform and all these bells and whistles and this cool SaaS product you could log into with these crazy charts and graphs, we were like, okay, we went to a bunch of companies and a bunch of high up executives, and we said, hey, this is what we're thinking. Do you like it? Is it valuable to you? What do you use? What do you not use? Right? We were selling spreadsheet data, and that, the people watching this may not have a spreadsheet data, but what they might have is they might have a mock-up, or they might have something like a very basic wireframe, or they might have an idea of a service that they're like, hey, would this be valuable to you? So before you kind of go, out, don't think of it like build the product, then you sell it. Think of it as a kind of collaborative weaving in process, right? Mm-hmm. And then that's where you will really start to build the right product. So that's one school of thought. The other school of thought is more the Steve Jobs school of thought, which is my customers don't know anything. I'm going to build what I think they want. And you really only get there when you have reached a certain amount of critical mass, right? Where you've got enough customers that have been buying into time and time again, your early adopters to your middle stage to your later adopters and things like that. You can really only do that when you get there. But in the early stages, it's really a conversation with who you think your customer is about what is it that they really, really need and why. So I would actually reframe the question to how important is customer development in the actual B2B product building process? It's everything, right? Do you want to waste your time or not? And a lot of developers, unfortunately, I have a lot of developers that take the Startup Sales Bootcamp product, and they say they have, it's like a reluctance to get on the phone or get into a meeting or something like that. And you kind of got to step out of that comfort zone and make sure that you're really building something that solves a problem for them.
Great. Everywhere you turn, we turn right now, there's something being written about account-based selling. And when your course is focused on, when you say sell to enterprise, you're talking about big companies, or it's a methodology for any type of sale?
I'm really focusing on going into larger organizations. A new product or a disruptive product that kind of makes people in the organization think differently. So the reason why we've grown to 2,000 customers in this product so quickly, I think, is because of the fact that nothing like a course like that really exists. But also, it's a not easy to teach skill, right? And so when you think about sales and you think about teaching people that haven't done sales before how to do sales, there's a big disconnect there, because a lot of sellers will give you an answer like, it's really complicated, right? And there's a lot of gray area. And yes, that's true, but I have this way of breaking things down into being very black and white and yes and no and answers, because I do think that's, it's a more simple way to think, and it's a more simple way to train. So that's what Sell to the Enterprise is really about.
Because I was telling that it's been a lot of people have been talking and writing about account-based selling. What has actually changed in the past years in sales to big accounts? Because we sell to enterprise since ever, but especially in the past 2 years, there's a lot of people writing about ABM, ABS. In your opinion, what has actually changed in this past few years?
Sure. And just so you know, Daniel, I can go a little bit over on time, so don't worry about that. So the question was, what actually changed with ABM in the past year? Well, people were trying to sell software, and they're selling ABM software. So that's actually what's going on. So that's what the conversation is.
Main difference.
Oh yeah. So what happened was there's a lot of companies that are just building software around an old way of doing things,
Okay.
right? The painful part of I need to convince 20 people in an organization to buy this, right? But what really has actually happened too is that you've got on a macro level, you've got millennials kind of moving into the workplace, and the millennial way of doing things is very consensus based, very democratically driven in terms of decision making. And so what that's done for the actual enterprise company, any company buying process, is it's not made the decision up to the CEO or the CTO or this person, it's made it up to 20 people now. So companies saw this and they said, okay, so how can I automate and how can I make it easier for a salesperson to get into this account and actually be successful and touch all these different people, right? And that's really what ABM is about. And so there's grown this whole conversation about it, mainly to sell software and more consulting services. But really it's legit because it's, you've got a lot more people you got to convince in a typical decision nowadays, which is making the rep's job a little bit harder.
Great. Just how much more time can we go?
Let me just email someone real quick, okay?
I have like 10 more minutes, I think would be great.
Okay. You're going to edit this out, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, I'm good to go for another 10 or so.
Great. I look at your Sales Enterprise program. That is one of your programs in the Sales Startup Bootcamp. And you talk a lot about best practices for building lists, as well as free and paid tools to get there faster. Could you share some of these tools with us?
Sure. So we have a few partnerships for people that actually buy the course. So for example, if you do buy the Sales Enterprise course, you get discounts on things like Datanize, which is a product that's going to help you really understand more quickly who's lowest hanging fruit, if that makes sense, like easiest and most convinced to sell, which is obviously a huge time saver. Other products that we have deals with are SalesLoft, which is a wonderful product if you find yourself having to kind of organize and manage a cadence of a lot of people. You talked about the predictable revenue strategy. A lot of US-based companies are getting really, really creative on how do they touch a specific contact. So, 2 touches on email, 1 on LinkedIn, shoot them a tweet, like organizing that whole process. SalesLoft does a great job doing that. We offer a pretty nice discount for any organizations looking to do that are students of the bootcamp. Another one is Persist IQ and Outreach IO. So those are big kind of outreach, email, touch point, cadence, kind of automation tools that are also doing a number of other really interesting things as they expand on the product to manage that.
Great. I saw you saying that finding your prospects pain is the #1 most essential part of the sales process, and I completely agree. But how can we uncover those pains in an enterprise sale?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you go, shameless plug, but if you wanted to get like literally I have literally a list and a cheat sheet of questions that are organized by the stage of the sale. I call it the buy-in method, that are going to help you get to the heart of what is actually going to sell and close that deal. And I call them pain-finding questions because they get to the heart of why would this person or this company actually buy my product? And the reason why it's a question and not me pitching you or pushing you or saying, look at this feature, or this is what you have to do, or pushy, right? That doesn't necessarily work because it doesn't get to a deeper level of their psychology. The idea is, and I forget who said this, but the idea is that people don't want to be sold. They don't want to feel like they're being sold, but they love to buy, right? You love buying new things. You love feeling like you made a good choice. And really what a good salesperson does is they just make you think that everything was your idea and you're making the right choice, you know? And they don't do that by pushing product on you and pushing and pitching. And they do this by asking the right questions, right? It's all about questions. And so the idea with the pain buy-in and getting people bought in on the pain is, instead of me pitching you something that I believe to be true and valuable about our product, I ask you a question to get you to iterate back to me what you believe to be true. This way it becomes your truth, and the more it comes out of your mouth, the more you actually psychologically believe it to be true, right? When you start to admit things, when you start to say things, when you start to articulate things, your brain actually starts to believe it. Like you start to, you know, it starts to become your truth because it came out of your own mouth. You can't speak lies, right? It's coming out of your mouth. So when it becomes your truth, you already start to sell yourself. And that's when the magic really starts to happen. You start to become a believer. So it's way more powerful than any pitch, any marketing material, any pushy kind of sale, if that makes sense.
Totally. We've been using a lot of question-based methodologies here, as like spin selling and Mark's GPCTs. So I completely agree that question, it's the most powerful way to sell, is asking good questions.
I'm all about questions, Daniel, because it's also just, questions are powerful in terms of what to ask yourself in what matters, right? What kind of product do you want to build, right? What question or what problem are you asking? Like, you got to ask the right question before you come up with the right answer, the right product, the right anything. It's all about questions.
We're talking a little bit about literature here. So when we look at the sales literature, it tells that we need to guide the conversation to get to the decision. But how exactly do we do that when most people subconsciously avoid decision making? And how do we guide the conversation while still making the prospect feel like they're in control?
It's all about questions. So in the actual free sales course you can sign up for at startupsalesbootcamp.com, there's a free sales course. It's basically, I teach you all the questions that you could ask to get them bought in. So, you know, a simple example just a very, very, very simple example would be something like, hey, Daniel, would you be okay with me asking you a few questions about your current situation? Instead of just going in and asking you those questions.
Asking permission to ask, right?
It changes the dynamic completely. It's so simple, right? And now all of a sudden, let's say I ask, Daniel, can I ask you some questions? What do you say?
Of course.
Okay, so now all of a sudden you feel like you're in control.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I welcome these questions, as opposed to entering into some kind of interrogation session where I'm like, what are your pain points? Like, no, that's awful. Like, stop, right? You got to get Daniel bought in first with the idea that you're going to ask some questions, make it feel like he's guiding the show, you know?
Yeah, totally. Juliana, thank you very, very much. We're going to link your course and your free email course also here for people to get to know a little bit more about you and your work. It was a pleasure to have you here in the summit. So where else people can find more about you?
A good place is obviously if you sign up for the course. I actually read all the emails. People can just reply to me seriously when they get those emails, and I read every single one of them. I don't always get a chance to respond. I wish I did, but if you reply to any one of those emails or just ask me a question, I'm usually relatively responsive. So sign up for the free course. If you have any questions, I say hi. I'm sitting right there. So yeah.
Yeah, I already read all your course, and it's really good. That's why we wanted to bring you here to share this with our audience. Thank you very much, Juliana.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best to the people watching this. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.